Good evening. In this broadcast, the information program Time. In just a few moments, a unique operation is scheduled to begin in orbital space, the approach of the American spaceship Discovery to the Russian station Mir. According to preliminary calculations, the distance on approach was to be 10 meters, but the technical condition of the American ship placed the space rendezvous under some doubt. What is occurring currently in orbit is being followed by our special correspondents in the Flight Control Center. They're ready to report live as soon as the operation approach begins, and this should occur during our information program. For now, we continue with the news, which will bring us not only back to Earth, but even underground. In the mines of the association Vorkuta Coal, a warning strike began today. Since morning, the miners descended underground. However, mining and unloading of coal was not underway to any of the consumers, including the local fuel energy stations. The pre-strike state in Vorkuta has ended. Two unions of the miners and coal workers finally have agreed and acted together. On this day, at 11 mines of the association Vorkuta Coal, only brigades supporting the functioning of systems were working. Coal was not mined and hence not unloaded. The strike was conducted in order to attract the attention of the government to the miners' demands, to liquidate the debt for 1994 and give guarantees for 95. What is occurring now, the closure of mines, it should be noted on the level of the government so that we can have some protection for the miners who are to be laid off from unprofitable mines. Later, we'll issue an appeal to the coal regions with a request to prepare for an indefinite strike for March of all coal regions of the country. The management of the association Vorkuta Coal, which includes 11 mines in the city, demonstrated no particular enthusiasm over the strike. Strikes will not help the financial situation. Literally, in the last few days of this month, when we began to receive payments on time for unloaded coal, in a way, it will help diffuse the situation. The 12th largest mine in Vorkuta Vargashorskaya today was not on strike. For a long time, it has been a joint stock company, and it's more lucrative for it to operate. At the rest of the mines of Vorkuta, it's predicted that the strike will end tomorrow, and the miners again will descend into the pit faces. But will they be able to go down one day later? The miners have not been paid since October, and if the salary they've earned are not paid, then, despite whether they wish to strike or to work, the miners simply will not be able to get to work. Today, people who are to be on duty, some people have not come because there's no money for the bus for the commute to work. They don't have 400 or 500 rubles? No, they don't have that any longer. Now about events in Chechnya. As of this morning, the Ministry of Defense forces in Grozny on the left bank of the Sonja River seized a significant strategic region. It's called the Minutka Square. Hence, a large group of the Dudayev gunmen was encircled by federal forces. According to Interfax, the Ministry of Defense forces have joined with the Ministry of Internal Affairs units, who likely will be conducting the purge of that region. The press center of the Ministry of Defense of Russia assesses the taking of this strategic point in Grozny as the end of the organized resistance by the gunmen on the territory of the entire city. The combat operations in Chechnya are of an oppositional nature currently. Federal forces have managed to take control over the majority of the capital of Chechnya. The gunmen are beginning to flee from Grozny. They're leaving their positions usually at night, making their way toward Gudermest, the second largest Chechen city. The Russian troops are forced to open fire from long-range artillery on Dudayev gunmen. The scattered groups of gunmen still in Grozny are providing serious resistance. In the last days, active crossfire was underway near the city park. The federal forces seized one of the quarters near the trolleybus depot. The duel of fire doesn't cease with the Dudayev gunmen in the older industrial part of the city. Federal forces, together with the OMON units, have combed out more than half of the territory of that region. They've seized substantial amounts of weapons and combat technology. Our contingents, which have been fighting for almost 2 months in Chechnya, on a rotating basis are given leave of absence. According to the head of the administration of the President of Russia, Sergei Filatov, the number of Russian troops missing in the Chechen conflict are 456 people. Sergei Filatov categorically refuted the assertion of the chairman of the Committee of Defense of the State Duma, Sergei Yushchenkov, who estimated the number of casualties since the beginning of the conflict to be around 20,000 people. Today in Brussels, the session of the Council of the European Union convened on the level of Ministers of Foreign Affairs. Together with current issues, they will examine the results of the trip of the OSCE delegation to Russia and coordinate their view on the events in Chechnya. The Chechen knot can be resolved in no other way than under the conditions of respect for the territorial wholeness of the Russian Federation and its constitution. This is the final result of discussions in Vienna at the meeting of the Permanent Council of the OSCE, from where the Minister of Justice of Russia, Valentin Kovalov, recently returned. Today he told the press how Russian leadership sees the problem of human rights in Chechnya. Unlike Sergei Kovalov, of the same surname, the Minister of Justice proposes that massive human rights abuses committed by the Dadaev regime should be distinguished from the unlawful actions of the Russian military against the peaceful population of Chechnya. The issue is repression against Russian and the Russian-speaking population on the territory of the Chechen Republic. We are in possession of many facts when, during the Dadaev regime, the Russian-speaking population was thrown out of its apartments. There were cases of theft and murder. For the sake of objectivity, the chairman of the Commission on Observing Rights and Liberties of Citizens noted that during the military operation to disarm the gunmen, also human rights were violated, and mostly the right to live. This is impossible to refute, that because how many times, because of stray bullets or shrapnel, peaceful, innocent residents would die. Also, the right of residence was violated, for which the government must compensate victims for damage. From the legal point of view, the minister felt it was legal to deploy federal forces in the battle with the armed separatists, noting that this function should have been carried out not by reserve soldiers, but special contingents of the former Ministry of the Security, dismantled after October events in 1993. Events in Chechnya precipitated necessary changes in the text of the address of the President Yeltsin to the Federal Assembly. Initially, this address was planned for the middle of January. Today, it was learned that the President of Russia will deliver his annual address to the chambers of the Federal Assembly around the 16th or the 17th of February. This was announced by the Speaker of the State Duma, Ivan Rybkin. The work on the address to the Federal Assembly was spoken of by the President at his meeting with a group of heads of administrations of the subjects of the Russian Federation. There they examined the progress of preparations for the Pan-Russian Conference on the problems of local self-rule. As the press service of the President reported, the head of state informed the heads of the regions about the situation in the country and the progress of economic reforms. They also discussed ways to strengthen Russian statehood, improve interaction between the center and the regions of Russia. The concept of a new regional policy was discussed today at the parliamentary hearings in the State Duma. Evidently convinced of the futility of appeals and resolutions on the Chechen problem, deputies have assumed a new tactic and, together with the representatives of regions, held parliamentary hearings on the concept of a new regional policy. But the proposed principle of a new policy was not satisfactory to representatives of all local rule. At the same time, based on personal experience and consequences of the principle, take on as much sovereignty as you can handle, local leaders announced the absence of a common national policy. However, the essence of most of the speeches was that it's necessary not only to seek new forums for state structuring, but to develop laws regarding regional policy, because discussion and adoption of such documents can't keep up with the series of problems, and proposals and recommendations expressed at the parliamentary hearings will be conveyed both to federal and local organs of rule. The Council of the State Duma today discussed the question of the fate of Ostankino in light of the decree of the President of Russia to create a joint stock company, the Public Russian Television. Two committees of the Duma, the the Committee on Information Policies and the Commission on Property and Privatization were instructed to analyze the situation and within 1 month to submit a draft law protecting the interests of the government and the staff in the process of privatization of the television radio company. This decision was made in the absence of the Speaker of the Chamber, Ivan Rybkin, and because the Chairman of the State Duma was appointed Deputy Chairman of the Trustees Council for Public Russian Television. This action can be deemed not only as one directed against him personally, but against the decision of the President, who incidentally heads this Trustees Council. This precipitates the conclusion that there is a continued goal-oriented attack on mass media. It's sufficient to remember the last outburst against the Russian television and NTV in order to align today's decision of the Duma Council together with these actions. Our colleagues who are currently in the Space Flight Control Center report about the beginning of the experiment in space. The report is brought to us live by our special correspondent, Sergei Slipchenko. Thank you. Right now we're sitting here and we're very nervous because at 21:07 here in Flight Control we should have an image from the board of Mir and from the board of the shuttle spaceship in flight. Now they are 120 meters from each other, and at this very moment the image should appear from the spaceships from Mir and shuttle. For now we see only the image from Flight Control Center in Houston. We see there that Sergei Krigalov is sitting and with ease conversing with his American colleagues. The experiment is being conducted because this year Mir and the next flight of the shuttle should link up and a unique contact of Mir should occur, on Mir should occur. This should be the linkage between the Russian complex Mir and the shuttle, where joint experiments will be conducted. Some of the crew members will be exchanging crews from the shuttle and will transfer onto Mir, and the American astronauts from Mir will transfer on board the shuttle. And in this manner, the aim is to, in the year 1996, to create the complex Alpha. The agreement on the creation of Alpha was signed by the Prime Minister Chernomyrdin and Vice President Gore from the American side. The program is being carried out, and we've just received the image from the station Mir. The Mir sees the shuttle, and we have good view of the shuttle, which is slowly approaching Mir. Unfortunately, in this image, the actual moment of approach will not be noticeable, but you can see that the deck flaps are open. The board hatchways function as solar batteries. And you know, we've already reported that the flight is not going as planned because on the shuttle 2 engines are not functioning, which are needed during the approach. In our next report at 22:22, we will attempt to explain in detail how these engines could interfere in the approach to Mir and what is being done so that Mir is not covered with exhaust gases, and exhaust fumes in space are in an acid form emitted from the shuttle's engines. Now you can see that they are at a distance of 120 meters here in the Russian flight control. They've defined the zones and parameters of the approach outside of Mir, and for now the zone is 300 meters. That is the zone within which our specialists permit the shuttle to approach Mir. According to plan, they should approach within 10 meters. Now we can see the camera which is turned on board the Mir station. This is the board camera, which is not within the complex but outside the body of the station. And we can see the picture is now not so much in motion. We can see Mir, and we see the Mir linkage hub to be approached by the shuttle. Now, gradually the approach is beginning, and our specialists must give the order to the American ship explaining how close they can approach. Now, the American and Russian specialists are deliberating over the data, and when everything is clear, and you can even see the shuttle just beyond Mir. When everything is understood, at that moment the shuttle will approach within a distance of 10 meters. We're completing our live broadcast, our next live report from Flight Control Center at 22:22. At that moment the shuttle will approach within 10 meters as planned in the program. We continue our broadcast. In Kyrgyzia, parliamentary elections were held. The majority of the former members of the Communist Party of the USSR won with an enormous majority in the new parliament. The Democrats got stuck somewhere along the way. This was stated by the President of the Republic, Askar Akayev, commenting on the initial results of the elections. Elections for the Parliament of Kyrgyzia and district local councils, organs of local self-rule, were held. This is all that can be said for now, definitely. To the question of the structure of the deputy corps, there is no complete answer yet. In many districts, the second round of voting should be held on the 19th of February. In the lists, which yesterday included from 10, 15, and some places 20 candidates, only 2 winners of the first round will remain. International observers noted quite a high voter activity in the peripheral areas and recorded no blatant violations of the law. This is much due, in the opinion of the group of the State Duma of Russia, which visited various regions of Kyrgyzia, to the Institute of Local Observers and Entrusted Individuals who followed the entire procedure of the election and tallying of votes. I'm very hopeful that the people will come for the second round of voting and certainly will elect a parliament. Will selfish careerists end up in the parliament? Of course, there will be some of those. You had such a fear. What was it based on? None of us yet has sufficient political or democratic culture, and I think that these elections, the first free democratic elections, they of course will elevate the political culture of to a new level for our people voters. Another round of talks on the Karabakh regularization began in Moscow today. For the first time, it's held on the level of special representatives of the highest leadership of the conflicting sides. As intermediaries are diplomats of Russia and Sweden. They have proposed a draft agreement which provides for complete and final cessation of military conduct, separation of forces, situating international observers, and holding a Minsk conference on Nagorno-Karabakh. The question of peace and accord on the territory of the CIS was included in the agenda of a regular meeting of the heads of the Commonwealth countries to be held on the 10th of February in Almaty, in the newly built residence of the President of Kazakhstan. From general discussions on integration, the heads of the Commonwealth states are shifting to concrete steps. There are no unusual documents there, if we're not speaking of the general document, which will be adopted on a dignified celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Great Victory, which we're approaching. So that subsidies and pensions and other opportunities we provide to veterans of the war and war invalids would be identical in all the countries, and these celebrations should probably be common in Moscow. What the nature of participation will be, in other words, the entire complex of these issues. The second question is the document, which is called the Pact on Peace and Accord on the territory of the CIS states. I feel this is an important document, because the bloodshed on the territory of the Commonwealth, we must stop, and we must stop it with our own efforts if we are such a Commonwealth. Another round of talks between Russia with the International Monetary Fund has been deferred approximately until the end of February. Discussion at the talks concerned allotting Russia a reserve credit in the amount of approximately $6 billion. ITAR-TASS reports the reason for postponement are differences between experts of the fund and the Russian side on the question of the realistic execution of the proposed budget for 1995 in view of additional expenditures because of the combat in Chechnya, and also the law adopted by the State Duma to increase the minimum level for salary. The rate of the Russian ruble against the American dollar in trading at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange today fell by 18 points. The dollar today costs 4,133 rubles. Today, on one of the most business-oriented streets in Moscow, Novy Arbat, another branch of Most Bank opened. As every solid bank, it tries to get as close as possible to its client so that the latter doesn't have to go far for necessary services. The new branch is universal. That is, any citizen, despite his financial means, any company, no matter what its size or form of property, can open accounts in this branch, exchange currency, complete plastic card transactions, buy and sell travelers' checks. The basic funds are in the hands of the population. I have in mind those grandmothers and grandfathers, and I also have in mind our families. who have perhaps not the most sizable funds, but they are there. Evidently, the time has come when banks service not only state accounts and largest companies' accounts, but attempt to demonstrate concern for the interests of Russians themselves. The signing of two paramount political documents between Lithuania and the Republic of Belarus, the Agreement on Neighborliness and Cooperation and the Agreement on the State Border, is the main point in the itinerary of the visit to Vilnius of the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. The signed agreement opens a path not only to broaden political but trade and economic cooperation, and which is mutually lucrative. This was the assessment of the signed documents by Algirdas Brazauskas at the joint press conference of the heads of the two countries, incidentally held in Russian. In Poland, conflict is escalating between the president and the parliament, which is acquiring a more severe nature. Today, Lech Walesa meets with the Council of Elders of the Sejm. Lech Walesa has declared a real war against the Sejm. The former electrical worker who in the 1980s headed the anti-communist movement Solidarność, and later, after the Democrats came to power, he became the first president of Poland, has mounted the battering ram against the current legislative power. The formal reasons for that were delays in ratification of the state budget for the year 1995. However, the parliamentarians insist that they did adopt it, and the last word now belongs to the president, who has postponed its signing. Therefore, they feel Lech Walesa's possible decision to suspend the parliament the Sejm will view illegal, and on its part, it may hold the president constitutionally responsible. And yet the roots of the conflict go far deeper. At least three concealed factors affect the situation. First of all, Lech Walesa would like to rid himself of a parliament in which dominating positions for almost 1.5 years are occupied by former communists. Secondly, he's at loggerheads with his current premier, Pavlik, accusing him of throwing a wrench into the works constantly. They especially differed over the new appointments to key ministerial positions within the government. And the third, probably most important reason, is the presidential election coming in the end of the year. Lech Walesa is attempting to achieve a more reliable support base during the electoral campaign, and this is not by coincidence. Lately, his popularity in all sectors of society has fallen sharply. The confrontation between the president and the legislative government is like a very tautly drawn string, which may burst at any time. An anti-Israeli act of terrorism was perpetrated on the border with the Gaza sector today. An Israeli truck was ambushed and shot at. As a result, one person died, 2 were injured. Not a single Palestinian organization yet has claimed responsibility for this armed attack. However, the Israeli police is convinced that it was committed by gunmen of the Islamic movements Hamas or the Islamic Jihad. The leader of the PLO, Yasser Arafat, emphasized that the new terrorist act, victims of which were innocent people, is the work of the hands of adversaries to the peaceful resolution of the Palestinian problem. According to Arafat, such actions inflict damage to the national interests of the Palestinian people. Today in France, the automobile plants Peugeot and Citroën were at a standstill. The reason was partial flooding of facilities producing engine parts for automobiles. And several tens of thousands of people have temporarily been left without work. The most complicated, lengthy, and close to the press criminal trial against a foreign citizen. This is how the German press describes the trial, which ended in a guilty verdict of the Russian seaman Andrei Lapin. 1.5 years ago, he was accused of extremely brutal murder of 4 Russian sailors and a German captain, the entire crew of the cargo ship Burbel. Lapin was found in open sea 2 miles from the ship he incinerated. During the search, 60,000 marks were discovered in his possession. This amount, according to the police, should have been in the captain's safe. For 17 months, Lapin and his attorneys firmly stood on their own version of the tragedy. The captain and 2 of the sailors were killed by 2 mutinous Russian members of the crew, and Lapin had no other choice but to kill his colleagues in order to save his own life. The court sentenced Lapin to 1 year in prison conditionally and took a written assurance that he would not return to Germany. Despite the unanimity of the judicial panel, the investigative organs feel that the sentence has left many holes in this case. For example, why was Lapin, in defending himself, had to throw the bodies of 5 seamen into the sea? As the bodies were not found, he apparently tied an anchor chain to them. In what means did he manage to deal with the armed, in his words, muscular sailors? And how did Lapin come into possession of such an enormous amount of money? Why did he burn the ship and attempted to save himself on a life raft when there was no longer any threat to his life? After this fiasco, the police of Ostbrook intend to turn to their Russian colleagues with a suggestion to hold a parallel investigation. In the United States these days, there's active discussion of the Vladimir Zhirinovsky interview to Playboy magazine. A correspondent reports from Washington that the heightened interest is precipitated not by political statements of the LDPR leader. Vladimir Zhirinovsky offers an orgy to a Playboy correspondent. The headlines in the Washington Post: an invitation for group sex from the agency Reuters News. A scandal? Those who assert that they like the Playboy magazine for its articles and not photographs are probably being cunning, but one mustn't smirk. The truth is that the world-famous magazine for men is famous mostly for its interviews. They were given by Carter Castro, Martin Luther King, Frank Sinatra, Abdaikan Walensa, and now Zhirinovsky. He was interviewed by the correspondent Jennifer Gold.
There were moments when we felt very uncomfortable.
My first reaction was shock, just as my translator was. We asked him to stop. An insistent invitation for group sex, and with 2 bodyguards as well. All of this is within the interview, and all of it is also recorded on tape recorder. In America, it's cause for a lawsuit. The admission that he likes to look, and he's had more than 200 women, on this backdrop is only a savory detail. Although Jennifer said apart from sex, they discussed other matters in the interview. Russia is a political hermaphrodite. We need democracy, but a little force as well. Clinton will enter history as one of the fathers of the sunset of America. Probably each politician has the right to make such assessments, just as they have the right to demonstrate the level of their upbringing, forcing American readers, and they're not the Puritans, to yet ask the question, can this man claim that he intends to become the president of Russia? Each answers the question of what's good and bad differently. The correspondent of Playboy doesn't intend to file suit against the leader of the LDPR. The interview was published in its entirety so that others would know. The culture news. The international competition of young artists of ballet, the Lausanne Prize, ended in Moscow. Bizet Shadrin Carmen. Diana Vishnya, Russia, the laureate of the competition for the Lausanne Prize 1994, the grand prize and a gold medal, the student of the Academy of Ballet Vaganova in St. Petersburg. She's dancing in the Bolshoi for the first time in honor of today's laureates who previously showed their class on stage, the foundation which builds the art of choreography. 120 participants from 29 countries competed in the International Ballet Artists Competition, which for the 23rd year is being held in Lausanne and which featured some of the world's greatest dancers. The competition was purely European for a long time and little known in our country. In 1985, it was held in the United States, in 1989 in Japan, and finally in Moscow, because of the efforts of the state concert. And you see its laureates and the main prize holder, the gold Lausanne winner, Garcia Gazal. He's 15 years old, studies in Saragossa in Spain. I'm very happy that we came to such an unusual competition today, because it's the only competition which is happening through the efforts of the children. These students are not artists. All of them seem to have been raised according to the Russian school. I think no one will be offended with me. I rejoice today because the children are dancing the music, not dancing to the music, but they're actually dancing music. Apart from the grand prize, 4 dancers received the Lausanne Stipend Prize and 2 participants received the Lausanne Hope Award. Before our very eyes, stars are born, says John Neumeier. This is the tomorrow for the world's art of ballet. The victory of Russian racers Kirill Dragan and Vyacheslav Nikulin at the World Championships. Nikulin stayed in first place. The 24-year-old racer from Donnygorsk was successful on the Berlin ice, winning the Grand Prix of Germany. After Vyacheslav Nikulin, one more Russian auto racer, the world champion, the Muscovite Alexander Bolshov, ahead still 6 levels of the thorny obstacle course. In anticipation of those events, we'll look at others. The big boxing festival in a small suburban Moscow Lyubertsy town. The tournament to the memory of the master of sport, Sparta player Yuri Kapitanov, his traditional boxing calendar. Among the special guests are various ages and generations of boxers: Lev Segalovich, Boris Lagutin, Boris Nikoronov, Oleg Frolov. And so the tournament under the flag of Spartak, which celebrates its 60th anniversary. In Lyubertsy, the Festival of International Boxing. One more snow sports ended in Russian with the victory of the world champion Pauli Pipeli from Finland at the chess matches between contenders for the world crown. Beginning in the Indian Sound Sangi Nagari, Anatoly Karpov signed a truce with Boris Gelfing from Belarus. The match for Vladislav Katokamsky has been postponed. In the United States, the Russian ball hockey team, losing the decisive match to the world champions, the Swedes 4-6, received the silver award. Meanwhile, another Russian ice hockey team is preparing for an international tournament for the Globe Cup tournament. I'll remind you, this trophy has been held by Canadians, Russians, Czechs, and Swedes. And that's probably it about the main events in the program time. Good evening. An atmospheric front connected with a cyclone over Scandinavia tomorrow will bring warm Atlantic air to the majority of European Russia and the countries of the near abroad. Therefore, in the Baltic states in the central and western areas of Russia, rain mixed with snow will pass through. Westerly winds will increase with icy roads and snow drifts, temperatures around zero. To the Kola Peninsula, by the end of the day, cold Arctic air will begin to seep in and temperatures will fall to between -2 to 7. In the north of the European part of Russia, it's cloudy with snow, blizzards, and gusty winds. In Karelia, in the Arkhangist district, 0-5. In the Republic of Komi, -2 to 7. In the northeast, down to -10 degrees. In the Volgovyatsk area, the winds will be much weaker, but here it's cloudy with wet snow during the day, 0-5. Along the central Volga, there will be snow. Temperatures will rise to between +3 to 8. On the lower Volga, the lower Don area, and the Krasnodar and Stavropol rim areas in the republics of the northern Caucasus, in a belt of high pressure, variably cloudy skies with some isolated patches of drizzle and fog with the visibility of less than 500 meters at night, -5 to 7 during the day, around zero. In the Chechen and Ingushetian republics, at night around zero, during the day, +1 to 3. In northern Ossetia and Dagestan, +5. On the Black Sea coast, there is some light rain, +7 to 9. Beyond the Caucasus, rains will pass through in the mountains with snow. In Georgia, Azerbaijan, +5 to 10. In Armenia, 0, +5 degrees. In Belarus and in the north of Ukraine, in the zone of atmospheric fronts, it's rain mixed with snow, temperatures of +1 to 6. On the rest of the territory of Ukraine and in Moldova, at night, with clearing skies, down to -5 during the day, from +1 to 6 degrees. In St. Petersburg, it will remain cloudy with precipitation and strong gusty winds, temperatures around zero. In Moscow, on the 7th of February, it will be cloudy with wet snow with icy roads. Winds are from the west in gusts 7 to 12 meters per second during the night and day, from -1 to +5. The forecast was compiled on the data of the Oceanic Meteorological Center. All the best. Goodbye.